Hello, everyone, and welcome to Code Red Live. I have with me Lariel Fernandes, Principal AI Engineer at Dash0, and Ben Blackmore, Co-founder and CTO at Dash0. Welcome to Code Red. And today we want to talk about AI and AI in the context of observability. So I want to get started by discussing what AI actually means, right, these days. I think in observability, we always have used some sort of AI. Is it statistics or anomaly detection, machine learning? But these are causal AI. But these days we talk more about Gen AI. Do you want to, Larry, let's start with you. Do you want to take us on the journey and what AI means and what the interesting part is for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you said, back in the day, we used to have like observability tools powered by AI, right? So you expect to have things like pattern detection, clustering, search indexing, anomaly detection, causal identification. And you expect people to use these tools to do a better job in observability. And then nowadays, with Gen AI, you have yet another layer on top of this because we start moving to a scenario where AI has agency, like the humans working in observability, to build on top of the existing algorithms that we have traditionally to get things done automatically, and it opens up really a lot of possibilities.
Yeah, that makes sense. And we are discussing a lot at the moment the coding agents. So I want to start. And Ben, I told you, as probably a lot of CEOs, I want that performance boost. So please test all the possible coding agents and see if we get to that 10x productivity, right? So give me a little bit, take us on the journey, right? I think you tested all the tools and where are we today? What are we using today? And how are the things going?
Yeah, that was definitely exciting to start with this, right? Because the promise is huge. So if somebody tells you everyone gets 10x faster, it sounds really awesome and really cool, and you don't want to lose out on this. And it also maybe gives you that hope that you can keep the team really nice and small, right? And have everyone just super productive. Um, because that works better also for like a product that we are building, right? Where we pay a lot of attention to the product and product love. And yeah, so we went on a journey testing it, right? Discussing a lot, looking at various tools, right? From obviously there's Cursor, there's Windsurf, there's Cloud Code, and there's so many others. Both on the, like, let's say just the coding side, but also the key code review side, right? Because there's a lot of other tasks that engineers are doing. And yeah, we have spent a lot of time looking into those and testing those, right? Also overcoming the initial skepticism that, of course, many engineers have, and me included. All right, when somebody's going to take away what you really like to do, and yeah, I mean, I've told you, right, and I think you posted that a few times as well. I've spent a few thousands on a variety of tools. Uh, I'll be honest, some trial fatigue also is setting in, and yeah, we have found a few tools that our engineers like, right, that they get value of. I would say first and foremost, that's Cloud Code, um, as a tool that you can use. I mean, first and foremost on a terminal, right? It's not as integrated as a Cursor, but it's working remarkably well for larger products such as ours, right? That are exceeding just a web app or whatever. But I'm unfortunately have to say that we are not getting a 10x boost out of it. Admittedly, we are still learning, right? We're learning that this is a tool in a tool belt and that you have to learn how to use the tool, right? Just with anything else that you have. And that we're seeing, depending on the task, that it's a lot faster. Like our prime example was building out these alerting integrations where the scaffolding can be done fully by any coding agent, really. But then there's all the other tasks that engineers have that are then not automated. And then so this is where you still aren't a lot faster, for example.
Yeah, I mean, still we are excited about it, right? And we are very early on a journey. I think
Yeah.
the models will get better. We will learn better how to use those tools. The tools will learn better how to use the models. So, and that's also why we went on this journey to integrate into coding agents, right, Lariel? So we built something called an MCP server, right? So what is that? What is MCP? and why have you built it?
Yeah, let's talk about MCP. So, for anyone who hasn't heard about it, MCP is this protocol that basically allows AI agents and assistants to interact with some environment where they can either perform actions on your behalf or get data to have more context to solve the tasks. And then at Dash0, we have our own hosted NCP server, which we have extensively tested with different AI assistants, including Cloud Code and Windsurf. And it basically allows the agent to have access to the same features that a human user would like to see in a observability platform. So as a human user, if you're debugging an issue, you're usually interested in traces, you're interested in looking at logs, metrics, running queries, exploring what resources are available. And then there's also some higher level tools for debugging, like the triage of logs and traces, which is really powerful. And then all of this we try to mimic in the form of like a toolbox that the agent has access through via the MCP. So with a very easy setup, just pasting a piece of configuration in your client or cloud code, you can start asking it questions about what's going on in your cloud infrastructure. Why is this breaking? How can I make this faster? And it becomes even more powerful when you combine it with different MCP service, because if you have something like for linear, for GitHub, and so on, and it can correlate the context from your documentation to the task that you have at hand to what's going on in the infrastructure and make code changes, ship, get feedback from the infrastructure. It really builds this nice development cycle from the agent perspective.
Yeah, when we will look at our SRA agent later, right? The prototype that we have built. But what I found very interesting is that those agents behave very much like a human, right? I mean, it's very interesting if you watch an agent who does autonomously, it uses the MCP, it gets a result, learns from it, right? Interprets the text that it gets, and then tries to do the next action or get the next data. It does it in a way. So if a human struggles doing it, the agent will also struggle with it, right? If you provide functionality that a human can use to troubleshoot, the agent will be better, right? And you mentioned triage, Larry. Maybe, Ben, you can explain a little bit what triage is and why it's so good in troubleshooting and why it's also so helpful for an agent then.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was a really fascinating learning, right? Treating it like a human. And what we have in Dash0 is triage, which is, you can imagine it as a form of pattern analysis over like spans and logs, like identifying commonalities within like two sets of data. Like, let's say you want to identify what is special about my errors. Then you
Can show it, by the way.
I can also show it. Give me a moment.
We haven't discussed it, but it's live, right? I can ask whatever I want.
Yeah. Unscripted. And
Because I think it's nice to see what it really does, right? And then how an agent uses it.
yeah, right. So I don't know whether I'm on screen, but
Yes.
what we can do in Dash0 is to analyze what is special about the errors of my product catalog service, for example, right? This is within the OpenTelemetry demo here. And what it can very nicely surface is, in this case for tracing data, spans that have an error, what is special about them? Is there any attribute that stands out? And what you can do in Dash0 here is we are summarizing that for you, and we are basically surfacing, for example, here that this specific product ID correlates very highly with errors, right? So this ID occurring on error spans, but also on successful ones, which is pretty interesting to see, right? Also from the point of forming an hypothesis that this is occurring on both. Maybe this means it's flaky, or it is always failing. Maybe this is two different span types. We could further drill down into that, but we can also just read this first line as a form of sentence, right? What is it that is exactly failing? What RPC method is it? What operation name? And so this is a really powerful capability at the end of the day to surface information within tracing data and logging data. And where this gets really interesting and where this learning is coming in is we have this capability, and you can also do way more with this, like analyzing specific areas, for example, to troubleshoot latency problems. And the very first attempt of integrating this in an MCP server, what we did is we basically gave it the API, which means you have all the flexibility in the world. And what we learned is that the LLM basically had no idea what to do with it, right? So this very naive approach of just expose the API and all the knobs that there can be didn't really work. And so as we were experimenting, we were starting to think about, hey, we also have learnings from users, right? We were also shipping it to users. We were learning from them, what are the patterns they're using it for, what do they find most valuable, and how would they like to use it? And so we just started to repackage it basically, right? Give it less options and somehow treat it like a user. And at that moment, it really understood finally what to use it for, right? And this was a really interesting learning both for that capability, but also for others. Like how do you summarize information about a service, for example, right? So we tried similar things there, and then the same thing happened, right? If you model the sidebar content that we have in the product, for example, in a textual interface for the LLM, then this also very notably improved than the following steps that the LLM was taking.
And how does it work, Lariel? So we return a text representation, or how does it work? If if the LLM, and I think we use Claude right at the moment. So if Claude, essentially that LLM calls our MCP and uses trash, what is the answer, and what does the LLM do with it?
So that's a really good question because we're actually still iterating on that matter. So at the moment, we are betting on markdown content. So we basically model what the user would see in the UI as a piece of markdown that then the LLM can interpret. And we also have to remember that there is a human in the loop in most cases. So that there is a human who has interacted with Claude to ask it to solve a problem, and the results of the tools they need to be consumable and digestible also for the human. And then a markdown is a nice format that LLMs understand, and humans also get a nice render in whatever user interface that they're using to communicate with Claude, so that they see what was the result. Then they can also judge whether the solution proposed by Claude is well grounded on the information that was returned, right? But we're still experimenting with those because the MCP protocol is really nice when it comes to like output formats. So you can have structured output formats conforming to a certain schema. You can have embedded content like image, so like a snippet of a dashboard, or you can have embedded UI elements, and it really opens up lots of possibilities. So we're really experimenting with what all works better, both for humans and for the AI.
Yeah, that makes sense. And inside of the the markdown, then there's literally text and information about the traces, or what how can I imagine that?
Yeah, so we try to make it as compact as possible because you see, when working with telemetry data with and LLMs, the problem is telemetry data can be very token hungry, we say, right? So it can become very verbose, which means you pay a lot for processing those tokens. It becomes slow. It starts increasing the likelihood of hallucinations. So we try to model that outputs in a way that it is digestible for larger models. And sometimes this may involve some kind of post processing. So we can employ different algorithms, like from a think of traditional machine learning algorithms, things like clusterization, summarization, forms of representing information on a higher level. So instead of giving raw data like that is very verbose to agents, you give them what has already been after the numbers have already been crunched, right?
Yeah, and I can show this also in Claude Code what it just looks like. And I just shortly screen share. I don't know. Can you see it now?
Not yet.
Somebody can put me on
Yes.
Yeah,
on screen. Thank you, Studio. So, for example, when you're integrating this in let's say, Claude Desktop, right, you can see when you query something, what it's doing through these tool calls. And
So you ask, why is my card service failing? So that's the question. And then it connects to our MCP server and checks for the card service and what's happening, right?
Exactly right. So first of all, it starts finding out what is really the name of the service, right? Because very often humans are using like a small variation of it, not like the exact name, the technical name, right? And then, right, it's using, for example, the service catalog in order to identify it, right? Through which it's already getting some highlights. And if you look at it, and this is a bit hard to see here in this format, it's easier to see for the following call where it's then getting the details is that we have been experimenting a lot with a tabular structure. So Lariel has been trying a lot of formats just to see in what format can we represent this nicely and concisely, as she has said. And then picking up on the point of summarizing it and putting it in a format similar to how a human would be able to conceive it or understand it is, this is essentially following the structure that we have in the sidebar in the product.
And I have a question. When I see those things, essentially the column names are tag names from the semantic convention, right? OTA semantic convention. Does that help? Because it's an open format and probably the models are trained on that documentation. Does it help the model to understand what it's looking at?
Yes, absolutely. Right. This is one of the huge benefits of OpenTelemetry, standardization, not just on the data format, which we have had before in various permutations, right? But the semantic conventions as they came out, that was really a game changer. This will be a game changer going forward as more and more people are adopting it. And AIs can just learn about this. I mean, they're anyway learning about it because it's in their training sets that is so widely existing on the internet. But they can learn what some of those mean, right? Some of them, of course, are more self-explanatory, like a cloud availability zone. But there are much more nuanced ones that they can then work with down the road. And that's really the game changer, right? That extends both to the attribute keys, but also to things like metric names that OpenTelemetry is also expanding to, right? So if an LLM wants to inspect, let's say, the HTTP request frequency or duration, right? They then know how to, or let's say they have some of that knowledge within their training set. Ideally, they have a way still to figure out what is available. And we have some of those things within the product, right, that they can then learn what is available for a specific service, for example. But that is a true superpower then in the long term.
Yeah, and that's kind of where we are coming to, right? How to use that in observability, right? I think there are we have seen, I would say, multiple iterations already in a very short period of time. We did this, our competitors did it. I think at the beginning, because we all knew ChatGPT, everyone was kind of in the chat mode. So at the beginning, I think we saw a lot of these, I would say, chatbots, right? Where you could ask questions in the chat. Hey, give me all the logs of service at XYZ. So it kind of replacing the query language or the filtering with a more conversational form of user interface. I'm not the biggest fan of it, to be very honest. It always looks a little bit like Clippy in those days, right, where you have some sort of bot popping up, and I think we are also seeing that a lot of the vendors are not that enthusiastic about it anymore. And then I would say the next step, and that's where we are right now, is more the agentic world, right? So where people talk about agents, and agents are, I would say, little tools that take over simple tasks or tasks, right? For that normally a human would do. And we are talking about a category now. I think Gartner is talking about, others are talking about, it's called the AI SRE agents, right? That's essentially, and there are companies out there who are building AI SRE agents, which is an agent that connects to those MCP servers of one or multiple tools, tries to figure out what problems are, and then in best case, automates tasks, right? Like scaling your infrastructure up and down for cost reasons, or I don't know, restarting something because there is a problem, which we all know also from our history. humans tend to be very cautious, right? Letting an agent autonomously do something your production-wise. It's a little bit like autonomous driving, right? At the moment, I would say we still have a driver inside, and we look what the agent is doing, and then we probably say yes, do it or not do it. But we are also working on that type of agent, right? We internally call it Agent Zero, and maybe Ben, you can pop it up, and Larry can talk a little bit what we are doing. It's kind of an experiment at the moment, I would say, right? And we want to release it in the next few weeks, months. But it is an SRE agent, and yeah, what are we seeing here?
Ben or me?
Larry, go ahead.
Yeah. So basically, the Agent Zero is this assistant for debugging certain alerts. So if you have in your failed checks something in critical or degraded state, you can go to the agent tab and have it kind of diagnose what is going on with that service, what is causing that failed check, and propose what to change or how you could possibly fix that. And in order to achieve that, it's basically a language model connected to different tools. So that the tool that allow it to look at what metrics are available and build queries, run queries, look at the results. And in this case, because we own both the back end and the front end for the agent, where we have the opportunity of showing the results of tool calls in a really nice way. So you can see like the query that was executed and the snippet of the chart, and you have a tooltip on it, so it's fully integrated in the UI. And this is really nice, and in comparison to what you would get in a generic like a agent client UI. And then in the end, what you have is a diagnosis of the problem, where different hypotheses have been tested, and based on the data that was retrieved, you have yeah, a human or digestible explanation of what's going on in that system.
Yeah, and that's exactly the case here that we have seen before, right? There's a catalog service with an higher error rate, so this is red, right? And then we do a root cause analysis, and it essentially probably used that feature that the triage feature, right? And it basically tells out that there are two product IDs that cause that error right here. Yeah.
Exactly right. And this is, so the interesting thing is, this is of course a very early version, right? This is mapping to also what we have seen in Claude Code. There's a lot more that you can do based on this to make this a lot more advanced. But I think what's really interesting here is how to integrate this also into a product, right? Because you kind of need to understand what it has been up to. And you also need to cross-validate what it has seen, right? This is the idea. This is not fully there in this version, just to see what is it exactly doing, so that it basically can treat it like an expert, right? I know, Mirko, you have been doing troubleshooting for a living, and not everyone is able to do this, right? So having a buddy there, even if the buddy is a quote-unquote robot, can be really helpful for many, right? It can be a real enabler.
Yeah, I have to say, when I saw this the first time, I was pretty shocked, right? Shocked in a positive way, how good the analysis was, right? I mean, I also know that it doesn't work all the time, right? And you have to investigate, and we are still figuring out, as Larry mentioned, right, how to present the data, how to do this integration best. But at the end of the day, if you look at this here, I mean, we are talking about thousands of spans. If you have errors and you have to find why, the root cause, right? The needle in the haystack. And essentially this agent did this job in, I don't know, when you let it run, probably a minute, right? It takes a minute. And
I haven't reloaded it because of rate limiting of Anthropic.
but in a minute, it figures out what could take you hours or days of your best developers to figure it out, and it gives you a nice explanation. And now again, coming back, you could integrate it in your coding agent and let Cursor or Windsurf suggest a fix, right? Because now it can connect to the code base, to GitHub or whatever, right? Through another MCP. That's what Lariel meant by using multiple MCP servers, right? And now it could say, oh, and by the way, do this and that, right? So it's very powerful, and you can just imagine in the future how multiple agents work together. You have access to multiple MCP servers. Those servers will get more and more intelligent. So I think we are pretty bullish on this agent topic, and we will release more and more of these root cause analysis agents for automations. I can imagine agent that will update your dashboards for a new release, right? Or updates your alerts for a new release. I think there are many tasks that can be done with that technology.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because when people talk about agents in observability, they often think of root cause analysis and incident resolution, because it's an obvious use case, and it yes, saves people a lot of time when time is critical. But we don't need to limit ourselves to that use case, because there is just so much more that you can do in like a platform team with an agent like that. If you think of like the work that humans have been doing as a SRE and platform engineers, a lot of it's not really incident resolution, but rather preemptive maintenance. So doing stuff like migrations, improving infrastructure and performance, looking for bottlenecks so that they can address, making things more secure, identifying any security issues. And lots of those things can also be automated with a AI agent, especially when it has context of both the telemetry and code and documentation and open issues on linear. Because I can connect all of those contexts, and we got already some pretty good examples, like success cases with our own MCP server when combining it with either Claude or Klein. One of them the other day has been when I needed to update our instrumentation for larger language model clients. And there is this new generative AI semantic convention. So, okay, I needed to, in theory, I would need to read what changed in the semantic convention and then look at the library and then change it, test it, see if the telemetry comes out compliant. And basically, I was able to automate that with Cloud, because it could look at the docs, make the change, or run a script to generate some signals, look at the data on Dash0, match it, reiterate, and in basically a couple of minutes, I had a fully up-to-date instrumentation for language model clients, which I would have taken me a couple of hours to work on.
Yeah, and what I like about those use cases is that you really automate the stuff that people don't like to do, right? I mean, it's as you mentioned, Ben, some of the coding agent, right? The fear is that, I mean, as an engineer, I was a developer myself. You kind of love developing code, right? So if somebody takes you away that part, it essentially takes away one of the most fun part of your job, right? Which is probably why you would resist more. But if it takes away the job, for example, I release a new service and now I have to update 40 dashboards and 30 alerts, right? And put that new metric in or change the metric name. That's nothing that people really enjoy, right? And if you have an agent that takes away that work, nice, right? And we already did something very similar with log AI, right? One of the things that you have to do if you have unstructured log, you have to define all these patterns, right? For example, if you have a log and this has a product ID and a product name, you have to define, oh, by the way, this is how this log pattern looks like. It's like a regex, right? And sometimes you have to maintain hundreds of these regexes and they change, and then you have to update them. And so one of the first things, Larry, you worked on was saying, hey, let's remove that burden, right? And let's try to analyze the logs automatically. Let's detect the patterns and then derive the attributes out of it. And it works pretty well, right?
Yeah, yeah. Maybe Ben can show a screen of the log patterns while I give an
Yeah.
overview about it. But yeah, as you said, nobody likes to write regular expressions. If someone says that they like it, I don't believe them. And those patterns, they can change at any time. Sometimes without your developers knowing that they're going to change. You should, for example, have an update in a dependency that is writing the logs. You don't know that the new version is going to be writing the logs in a different pattern, so you don't know that you have to update regular expressions. So it would be really a mess having to manage those by hand. And then what we did with the log AI was to identify those patterns eagerly every time that there is a change in the distribution of log texts, so that we can display this nice view in the UI where users can filter logs that match a known pattern. They can search for structured fields, and then one thing that I really like about this is how it goes beyond the identification of the pattern. It also gives semantics to the pattern by giving names to the fields that it extracts, and the names make sense in the domain of the application because it takes into account the resource attributes, the semantic conventions to really understand what kind of application this is, what it is talking about. So what field names make sense in that domain. And for developers, when like they deploy something new and then they go into UI and they see that their logs are understood, it's really magical.
Yeah. And Larry, I just want to mention, because we have some people in the audience here, if there's any question with regards to AI and observability, how we use it, about those patterns, please feel free to ask questions and we will try to answer them, right? You're very welcome to get into that conversation. Yeah, and what we have seen here is that we really extracted the attributes from the message automatically without any patterns, and it would adopt, right? How what are the challenges here? I mean, I know that with some customers, I know that we process millions of logs per minute, second, right? It's on a high scale, and I can imagine that you can't call an LLM for each of those logs, right? So how does that work?
Yeah, a very common challenge of AI in observability is that things get expensive really fast if you don't take care, right? So we had to go really careful about this and come up with clever caching strategies, and also strategies to identify when the logs coming from a certain application that they change in distribution. So in statistics, we usually talk about distributions, right? And when you think about the logs, that they have a certain word frequencies that can be identified with traditional natural language processing algorithms. And if the distribution in those changes, then you usually suspect that something in the patterns has changed, and that it's a good occasion or the opportunity to try to re-evaluate them. So we have many mechanisms in place to apply the full logic of the pattern mining as few times as possible, to reuse as much information as possible, so that people have up-to-date patterns with names for the fields that make sense in their domain, but without it becoming a super expensive thing for us. Especially when we remember that this is a feature that we offer for free, right? People only pay for the data that they send us, and that they get this out of box. So we need to make it really efficient, and that's to me the most challenging and also the most exciting part.
Yeah, makes
That
sense.
was
And by the way,
struggled with in the past, right? A lot. It's like we had great ideas, we had some great algorithms, and then we couldn't get that to production, right? So that's a really terrible situation to be in when you later realize, after having invested so much time, that, God damn it, I can't get it out, I can't deploy it. So this was from day one, this time, a huge consideration, and I would urge everyone that is in a similar situation um, to do the same, right? It needs to be a day one concern if you go down any path like that.
yeah, absolutely. Before I ask my question, I had one about false positive. I see that Uwe Baumbach has asked a question here, and it's a very good one, right? And I think my perspective on it as a user, because I'm demoing the feature almost every day, right? And the question is, if you have that agent and it does a root cause analysis of the same problem, is the answer always the same, right? And I can tell you, no. I mean, I did that test a lot of times, and the first thing I see is that the answer is almost always pretty good and accurate. It's not the same, right? It's different, but I think the result is pretty much, in this case, for example, for the product catalog service, the answer is almost always correct. I haven't had a case where it was not correct. But what was interesting is that the way the agent finds the problem is very different, right? You saw the different steps that it says,
Yeah.
give me the names of the catalog. So sometimes in your case right now, it was 4 or 5 steps. I had situations where it was 10, 11 steps, very different ones. So at least what I've seen is that the way the agent approaches the problem is different almost a lot of times, but the answer is pretty much correct. So give me your answer.
Exactly. No, I can only fully agree there, right? There's always some sense of randomness in there. And this is one of the core challenges here, right? Is getting it more reliable, getting it more consistent. That is one of the core challenges. Just building a prototype is the easy thing about this, right? Getting this reliable is the real challenge at the end of the day. And in my opinion, the path will never be 100% consistent. There will always be some sense of randomness in there. I would say the end result is the crucial thing. This is now not just related to what we are doing, right? This is basically every kind of use case around it at the end of the day. As long as the end result is the same and as long as the steps in between make sense, that is really good. And as long as you're watching out for the steps in between of what it's doing, right? For example, in our case, there's a lot of queries that it's trying to generate. And there are a lot of situations where in our experiments, it's just generating the wrong query, right? It somehow does something, gets wrong, and you need to figure out why. And I would argue that's probably the same for a lot of use cases where the tool calls are non-trivial.
Mhm. Yeah, but this questions are really important because it brings up the topic of evaluation. Because one thing we still want to do is to check, for example, the robustness of the agent solutions. So if you twist a bit the way how a certain question is asked, do you get the same answer or not? Do you get the same path? Or on average, the amount of stacks to get to the answer are the same. The amount of errors that the two calls that are invalid in order to get there, is it roughly the same amount? These are things that we can easily test when we have a set of questions for which the answer should be roughly the same. But then again, evaluating something like that requires you to have some observability environment that the agent can interact with that is already known. We can know what to expect from each task, right? So, because if you have a chaotic environment that is changing all the time, then you don't know what to expect. So it's difficult to evaluate. And then we usually go for the OpenTelemetry demo for all evaluations because it's a environment that we are already familiar with. And the problem is the large language models, the most modern ones, are also already familiar with the OpenTelemetry demo. So sometimes you can observe them cheating employing prior knowledge about the data set instead of actually investigating the data. And that's really annoying because it's like a data contamination scenario.
Interesting. Yeah, we have the next question of Florian, and he asked if that he actually saw posts about AI actually decreasing efficiency of developers and what's our take on it. I want to say a few things. I was recently on a keynote and there was a CTO of Windsurf, and he said 95% of the code at Windsurf is generated by AI, right? And I want to say that in my past, I learned that lines of code is not a good measurement for efficiency, right? So I would say the biggest problem I see at the moment that we see all those numbers around efficiency, and almost everyone in this space knows that it's very hard to measure the performance and efficiency of developers overall, right? And probably lines of code is not the best one. So I think always be careful about those numbers. I think from our experience, and Ben, you can tell it, I think we see an increase in productivity with those agents. But we also have to say, while you are experimenting, if you are experimenting with 5, 6 tools, I think the experimentations can take some of the productivity, right? Because you're just doing stuff to experiment. But if you would just say, okay, I use one tool, I've evaluated it, and then just look at how much better you are, I think we would see an increase, but it's not 10x or 5x or anything. It's a tool that makes you more efficient, and that's good, right?
Yeah, and that's exactly right. You have learning time for the tool. And I myself, I think I said that when I started this whole evaluation, right? I realized I can have Claude Code and I can basically quote unquote program during a meeting, right? I love programming, right? I'm now a CTO. I'm spending much more time, I said this earlier, in Google Docs now and in meetings. And I figured, maybe I can just program in the meeting, right? Just give it a prompt here and there. I can find time for it. And then eventually I realized that I have now 7 different pull requests open and I have no freaking time to somehow move any of them forward, right? Because all of them were in a state that I still had to touch up on it. And we have definitely seen cases where you start off with the AI and it leads you in a direction that you otherwise wouldn't have taken, and that you only afterwards realize, oh, this is actually not what I would have done if I had spent 5 minutes thinking about it, right? But because you didn't start thinking about it, you didn't realize it. And this for me boils really down to, this is a tool and you have to figure out how to use the tool and when to use the tool. And this is for us the biggest learning. So we have like some internal guideline documents on it. We have a channel where we are sharing learnings um, about how to use it and what to use it for. And there are some common learnings, right? So people love using it for test generation. They love using the Claude Code GitHub action for code reviews, actually much more than any of the other code review tools, interestingly. There are other things where it's working really well, like I mentioned integration writing, but there are a lot of cases if you haven't learned about that yet and you just start using it. And I think the study that Florian is referencing was the study where they had open source contributors work on issues both without and with coding agents. And I think so I don't know the specifics of how much they knew about those agents before, right? And exactly the use cases. But it might very well be that they were also still learning about them, right? And then maybe it's generating 500 lines of code really quickly, but if it's the wrong 500 lines, and then it doesn't help, right?
Yeah, and I think overall, what we are seeing in the market is that this topic is pretty much oversold in some cases, at least for the moment, right? When people say 95% of the code is written, it can suggest that 95% of the work is now automated, which we all know that coding is only part of the job of a developer, right? And so that's one part of the story. And so I think
I would
it's oversold.
But I would still say, not to sound too negative, I'm still really excited for it, right? Because the reality is, if we look back at for how long we have been using this, like Claude Sonnet 3.7 came out, beginning of the year? Now we're at 4. So a lot of the coding agents that people are using aren't really old in any sense of the word, right? So it will be really exciting how they are developing, let's say, in a year. And I don't think anybody can really know, right?
And by the way, we have another question here. What about creating panels and dashboards? I think that's a good question, right? Can you create dashboards with AI, right? For a certain case.
That's a really good point, and it's actually what I was going to comment in the sequence. So I suppose no one likes to write infrastructure as code, but coding assistants can also write that. And then at Dash0, we use the Persis format, right, for defining dashboards. Obviously, you can design dashboards on your own in the UI and export the definitions, but we have tried applying coding assistants to that task as well, but giving them context of what kind of dashboard we're looking for. In that case, it was something for AWS Lambda functions. And we can even give it some sketch of like you draw it yourself, or how you expect it to look like. And then because of semantic conventions, it can really quickly figure out what metrics to look for, what attribute names to look for, and then come up with the queries. And then through the Dash0 MCP, try out the queries against the live data to make sure that they work. And then in the end, make a pull request with the Persis definitions for new dashboards. And it has worked like a charm. The dashboards look beautiful.
Oh, that's cool. So essentially using a coding agent with our MCP to create the dashboards already, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And so we have some plans for that, right? We mentioned, I mean, we looked at this Agent Zero version, which is of course at the end of the day, the holy grail of you automate everything, right? But along the path, there are so many little things you can do to make the life of the people better, right? There's like PromQL explanations that we have that I honestly always found a bit gimmicky. But when you demo it to people that don't know PromQL really well, they're honestly happy about it because it's actually helping them close a small knowledge gap they have, right?
Yeah.
This, I think, there are a lot of small things you can use it for that aren't that super shiny, but that actually help in the day-to-day. And this is one of them.
We have another question here, Gaurang Patel. Other than coding, is there other place you are using agent development workflow? Good question, right? Especially, I mean, I heard you talking about review fatigue because now agents produce more code and you have to review more. So how can agents help with reviews, or where are we using them in addition to coding?
So yeah, code reviews are a really interesting one because, I mean, I guess everyone here is probably doing them or doing them to some degree. Like we have a lot of tools to statically analyze it. Everyone has probably tests and everything else. And yes, life is too short to learn PromQL. Right? And so I was really excited about code reviews because honestly, if let's say you make code reviews mandatory, pull requests mandatory, right? This is a blocker in the development workflow. It slows down engineers. And of course, reducing that time would improve cycle time. So I was really excited about it. And so that's where I invested a lot of time, is like trying different code review tools. And I'm not that super happy about it and not that excited about them because a lot of them are very, very verbose at the end of the day, right? So they create a lot of noise, a lot of context. That's one of the problems with generative AI generally, right? If it produces a lot of, it feels like it's being rewarded, quote unquote, for generating a lot of text. But you don't really want this, right? You don't want somebody nitpicking on something that is absolutely zero impact. And this is why we have been looking for alternatives to that, for example, which we found when the Claude Code review a lot less verbose and a lot more helpful. But yes, we have also other workflows, right? So Larry mentioned developers using it to generate dashboard panels. They're experimenting with it. We have some of our platform engineers have been using it just to learn about alerting patterns for new technologies they haven't used before, right? So we have all of our alerts maintained as code. And so they were asking it, give me a heads up, give me a starting point so that I know where to start with that technology. So that is really helpful. And one of my favorite things, which is not quite an agent, is of course I have to do a bunch of paperwork now. So I have like a Claude project with all of our security and compliance documentation. And when I get a question from a customer about a certain topic, I ask it, hey, what document is this defined again in? Because I forgot again which of those 50 documents is describing exactly this one point. And that is something that is helping me a lot in my day-to-day, but it's not glamorous in any way.
Yeah, that
Yeah, makes sense.
point. With the MCP server now, we all can also do RAG, right? Over our documentation on our domain. So one of the use cases when doing support is like finding something in the docs, finding the answer to a nasty customer question, something about a part of the domain that you're not familiar with, and you can easily get a solution and a suggestion of what query to build, asking the agent and having it look through the docs.
Yeah, and I will wrap this up here with the last question, and that was again Asaf with yes, when we answered, it was more about how to generate the code for a dashboard, right? Which is Persis in our case, and a lot, by the way, a lot of our customers and also us, we ourselves, we use dashboards as code, right? We deploy it with code, which we totally support. But of course, you can also add dashboards and panels through the UI in Dash0. And the question is, can we also support this with AI and Gen AI? And I would say yes. I think it's a very good use case that you could use, as Jurassic points out here, life is too short to learn from QL. So probably you could just say, hey, build me dashboard for my problem here in Kubernetes, and the AI would pick the right metrics and build the dashboard for you in the UI right away, right? I think makes totally sense. Yeah.
That's also if you think about, I mean, most people have somehow the same dashboards for common things This is why there are dashboard libraries at the end of the day out there on the internet. Because how you look at a Kubernetes node, for example, is pretty identical, right? How do you monitor a temporal server, right? One of the things that we're using is pretty much identical. How do you look at a specific database, right? You don't want to start from scratch there. But of course, you have some differences for your own things. But then it can be really helpful to get an idea of how to start.
Yeah. So this was fun. Thanks everyone for
Yeah.
joining this episode of Code Red Live for the first time. And thanks, Larry. Thanks, Ben, for joining.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good one.